Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parenting is Easy podcast, where we will discuss the pleasures and the frustrations, the good and the bad, and the rewarding and the troubling aspects of parenting. I am your host, Chananya Abraham, and I'm a psychotherapist that specializes in working with teenagers, young adults, and parents with a specific niche in assisting with communication within the family dynamics. While everyone has their own unique journey and experiences as a parent and as a child, there are many common affiliations and attributes that we can all relate to and share. Together, we will learn from personal stories and experiences from parents across many different backgrounds, cultures, and communities. So get comfortable, grab your glass of coffee, and let's get right into the interview.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is Chananya Abraham. We are here live from Parenting is Easy podcast. And today I have a special guest. I have Telma Sanchez, who is a life coach, and she's a bilingual life coach that mainly works with busy parenting situations, helping parents maximize their time so that they can feel more productive and energized versus being exhausted and stuck. Her mission is to help parents unleash their full potential so that they can feel empowered to live their best life. She specializes in time management, self-reflection, and accountability. She is huge on having fun and community building. So much of what she does includes both of these traits. So, without further ado, thank you so much, Telma, for joining us today.
Thank you. So for such a kind intro. It's so weird to hear it said to me.
Well, I think, based on, I'm sure we'll get to know more about who you are today, but, just to hearing what you do and how you deal with stuff. Can you just start with how you got into this field and what your personal life experiences have got you to where you are today in your profession and even your personal life as well?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I think that it all started a long time ago when I moved to the States and I didn't know the language. I had to learn it, and I found myself in a whole different world. I felt like I was living in a movie with no captions, because it was beautiful, it was green. We moved to Boston, and it's a beautiful city, but I had no idea of what was being said. And that was one of the first times that I was just like, okay, I have to figure this out. I have to find a new normal. In the need of trying to fit into this new world, I tried so hard and failed to lose my accent. So I took so many classes to try to work on phonetics and how to pronounce things and linguistics, all the things. Obviously, that didn't go so well, and I now I can just live with my accent, and I feel like I fit right in. But that definitely set me on a path of self-development classes. In which I just kind of wanted to understand how to live and love myself the way that I am and what I'm being presented with. So that was like the first challenge, right? And then I found a new normal. It was fine. Life was great. And then I had kids. And so it was a beautiful blessing. We actually struggled on getting pregnant. So it was great to finally meet my baby. But the moment that I held her for the first time, it was the most beautiful moment of my life. But at the same time, a lot of new fears came right at me. And
for sure,
I found myself in that same position in which I was like, all right, I am back into this movie where I have no idea what's going on. It is a beautiful moment, but I want to make sure that I bring my best foot forward. And so I went back into a lot of parenting classes, self-development, to just not allow the fear and the thoughts that I was having and feeling take over the experience that I have always wanted. So I always wanted kids, and I was so excited to have them. But then I felt so overwhelmed and scared, and like, how do I do this? And how do I not mess this up? And so that's exactly what set me into the path of life coaching, because I noticed that I wasn't the only one feeling this way. And as I was taking these classes, I would share it with friends that I knew were going through the same thing. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. So how long was it then from when you first came to America till you started taking these coaching classes online?
Well, I started taking a lot of self-development classes, which I have now realized that they're pretty similar. But when I was 15, I moved to America. Then I started college when I was 17. And so by 18th, I was already obsessed with all the classes because I was trying to lose my accent first. And then the actual specific coaching started when I was 25 and I lost my first baby.
Wow. How old were you when you lost your first baby?
25.
25. Wow. So you had 10 years of first being in America, figuring things out of how things work, learning a lot about yourself and growing exponentially, both personally, emotionally, hopefully maturely as well, and putting yourself in a position to try to, yeah, we could all hope that we're mature. So having that sense of growing up and putting yourself in a place to be the best version of yourself. And I think one of the first things that I took up from what you were saying is trying to change something about yourself, but then realizing, or maybe even embracing it in a certain way. And that putting you onto the path of being able to see a version of yourself and build a certain self-confidence that enabled you to be who you are right now. And I'm sure that was a very, very big part in you becoming who you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on top of that, you also have, going to a new school and trying to fit in, and as a teenager trying to put yourself in a position to be accepted by others, and feeling like, well, I can only do that if I speak the language the way they speak the language, and then realizing, you know what, that's not so true. Maybe I could figure out who my own self-identity is through this version of English that I speak that is very easy to understand. And I think there are certain words that you say that are probably even better than the way I say them, as someone that was born here in America. So I think it goes to show that there's a certain self-development and I guess you could say a confidence that you had to see for yourself and like grow into that enabled you to now have a certain sense of identity for yourself. And I would go as far as to say that probably had a lot to do also with, your partner that you made and that you found over here, and you were able to start a family, even though you had certain things that happened that, obviously was a setback, but at the same time, there was a certain sense of growth in that as well. So can you talk about that for a minute regarding how that was something that enabled you to be who you are now and how that helped grow this beautiful plant that you've created for yourself?
Well, gosh, thank you. I mean, you said it so nicely. Honestly, I feel like every single challenge that you face, you have a choice of whether you learn to work with it and use it to fill up who you are, or many of us, I did for a while, take a while. We tend to blame others.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes to show that we all go through life. We all go through so many different things that put us in a place of, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Am I putting myself in a position to be the best version of myself? And sometimes we have ththese setbacks that are sort of, okay, what's happening right now? And it helps put things into perspective.
And why? Yeah. And why is this happening? Sure. Like, why is this happening? And how do I go about still feeling like I'm worthy with what's happening?
For sure. 100%. And then you have on top of that, I think that helps create such a healthy foundation in a certain way for what's coming next and what we're talking about today, which is about parenting and how you try to be the best version of yourself, but also realize the best version of myself is not necessarily something that is la-di-da perfect, but it's who I am and everything that I built upon. I was just explaining to someone today in a session today with someone that sometimes we try to reach up for something, we can't reach it. So what do? We put a book underneath our feet to try to reach up higher. And then we realize, oh, that wasn't high enough. So I have to put another book underneath until the point where 5, 6, 7 books, and I could finally reach the thing that I want to reach. And I think when we talk about parenting and developmentally who we become is so much to do with our history and the trials and tribulations that we go through in a certain way. So
I think Absolutely. I think I'm sorry I get emotional, but it kind of, every time that I get asked that question, it takes me back to how I felt. And I mean, I'm so grateful to not feel that way now, but yes, it took a lot of different books, a lot of different things that I had to face, a lot of things that I had to work on with me and my husband, who is obviously the best person that I could have joined into this life and journey with. But being open about it was a huge, a big step of what the struggle was and not moving forward, because I was so ashamed of being open. So one of the best jumps was to just say it.
How do you feel that your relationship with your husband changed going through the things that you've gone through? And how do you think that's helped set a certain foundation for you guys as parents?
Well, we definitely learned that we are better together. We are better when we're on the same page, even though my husband and I couldn't be any more different, honestly. So having the communication of saying, this is why this is important to me, or this is how I'm perceiving this, or this is how I'm feeling about this, and then actually listening to the other perspective without judgment has been transformational for our marriage, because for a long time, we've been married for 11 years. But at first I was like, no, it's my way and I'm right. And you should just probably listen,
Right. And imagine putting two people in the room that say that at the same time.
Right, exactly. Because, we both had really valid points. So it actually took the sacrifice of compromise of like, okay, we're in this together. We're under the same roof. And we really want this to work. So how are we going to go about this? And sometimes it is okay to say, I think I hear what you're saying. I'm not necessarily ready to receive it. I'm not necessarily to agree with you. But at this point, I understand where you're coming from. Thank you for explaining. And for now, we're going to agree to disagree. Until maybe taking a step back, maybe taking a little bit of a break. And then coming back to the conversation with an open perspective when you give yourself some time to just realize how sometimes you're receiving a message, because sometimes different things that are said or brought up to your attention are, especially in a marriage, your blind spots, and they're hard to hear, and you don't want to see that mirror because you're just like, no, I mean, I am who I am, you try to justify it, you try to like blame the other person or the world or somebody. So yeah, honestly, like that hard conversation that sometimes we just don't want to have, it's definitely worth having, and it has made a huge difference in our marriage, but also in our parenting. Like we understand that if we're not on the same page, the first ones to pick it up are our kids.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said. And I think just to go back a second over here for what you were saying, which I think is one of the key points that I like thinking about often, and hopefully I'm doing the same in my own life, is, you know what? I don't know if I necessarily agree with you, but I hear what you're saying. Let me take a minute to think about it. And I think that minute that you put in, it's sort of like a wedge in between two people that's helped separate so that you could come back together. And when you do that, it creates a unified front by first separating, putting a pause in the middle, and then coming back together. That creates a certain atmosphere that we want to be with the other person, even excuse me, even in situations where we don't agree with them, with what they have to say. And like you just said, how that comes into play in parenting is so important, because there are so many times our kids do things where we don't like, we hate maybe, but let's take a little pause. Let's just take a little second to think right before we react to something that they're doing that might not even be wrong. We just don't like it. So I think your point that you were saying, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just think that you nailed it. Honestly, it takes 6 seconds for the brain between a reaction and an actual response. So if you can just take those 6 seconds to decide, do I want to react based on my own experiences and this history and who I think, like, or in these 6 seconds, you can actually make the choice of responding in a way that you are actually in control. Because many, many times that we are reacting, we are basing it out of who we are, how we grew up, what we know, what we saw, but not necessarily how we want to show up, how is that better version of myself? How would that person handle it? And if you just take those 6 seconds that it takes your brain from a reaction to a response, you can choose. You can make the choice of like, all right, husband or child, I need a minute. I'm not sure how I want to handle this, but right now I'm feeling triggered, so I'm going to step back, and sometimes it's a minute. I'm a woman, so sometimes it takes me a day, but then I can come back and say, I think I'm ready to have this conversation.
Yeah. Beautiful. And no conversation, I think, when it comes, whether it's to kids or to spouse, is off limits, especially to come back to and to put ourselves in a place of just being vulnerable to have that conversation, I think is so important. So I think, these life experiences, I think you're going back to our original question, are so vital for how we live our lives, but to our conversation, how we put ourselves in a place to be the best parents that we can, because there is no such thing as perfect parenting. There's no such thing as saying, I did a great job today, I score 100. But at the same time,
I can tell you that I feel like setting up yourself for that perfection is already so much pressure. And I mean, you're still human, and a lot of who we are as adults is still affected by how we got raised, what we saw, what we experienced. So yeah, I think you have to just take a moment back, like take a moment to realize this, when you're pregnant, you have all these dreams, and you even say it like, oh, I'm going to be the mom that is going to my kid is never going to have a rash. And my kid, all the things, right? All the things that you see in commercials.
He's going to wear every day, never get dirty.
Right. But yeah, the softest skin. I'm going to feed, I'm going to make all the meals. I'm never going to buy fast food for them ever. And all the things. And it's so easy to fall into the commercial type life. And then you meet your child, and then you try to add it into what normal you already had. And until you realize that it requires a whole new normal. But yeah, I think it's easy to forget.
Has there been anything that you could, remember growing up with your parents that was something that you were able to take from them and apply it in your parenting right now?
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel like, first of all, my parents were on the same page. So my mom and my dad couldn't be any more different. But if my mom said no, my dad was for sure going to say no, simply because they had to always back each other up. Right. Not necessarily because she said so, but because the decision was made. So if I went to my dad first and he said yes, then my mom had to be like, all right, your dad said yes, right? So being on the same page was huge on my side. And I love the fact that I could look at them as, well, it's not worth trying to sneak into the other person for a different answer, even though I tried. The other thing is that my mom was consistent. So if she was to say, dinner's at 7 and I need you to sit down and stuff, she would make sure that it is 7 and I need you to sit down, So I have been thinking a lot about that right now, because as we work on bedtime, sometimes it's a lot easier to just say, all right, fine, jump in bed and we'll try the training tomorrow. But I try to remember that consistency that I saw growing up from my mom actually made me feel safe, because I know that when she would say, yeah, go for it, then I knew that it was a decision that she had thought about, and so I felt more confident into going for it.
For sure.
I
love you the way you're saying that, and I think that consistency in parenting and the way we want things to be done in our home is so important. Just to add a little bit to that, and the way I like telling it over to parents is, it's important to be a tree, but you don't want to be a pine tree, because a pine tree doesn't move. And when a wind comes, there are certain trees, let's say a palm tree, right? People that live in warmer weathers can sort of see it a little more than I can over here in the Northeast, but palm trees shake a lot. But they're still rooted in the ground very, very strong. And as a parent, it's important to be a palm tree as opposed to a pine tree. If too strong of a wind comes, it snaps. And there is no getting it back together in a certain way. And I think when it comes to how we're supposed to be treating and helping our kids be the best versions of themselves, we have to be in a certain place ourselves regarding our structure. And then the way we're going to be giving things over to them is going to be important as well, to make sure that they're in a place to be able to be structured in the way we parent them. But at the same time, with a little bit of wiggle room. So if it's 8:01 and at 8 o'clock that they're brushing their teeth, and it's 8:11 instead of 8:10 that they're getting into bed, or even 8:20, 8:25 sometimes, it's okay to create that little bit of wiggle room. But that doesn't take away from that consistency that you're talking about. Because that consistency
Absolutely.
is key.
No,
very important.
Yeah, you said it beautifully. And actually, I have seen that a lot in my work as a life coach that works with parents, that it is very hard to acknowledge the fact that a lot of that resistance that we put into that wiggle room that you're describing between the palm and the pine tree comes out of the fact that we don't want to lose control, or that we think that we need to be like, we have to be the strong person, and we have to discipline, and we have to, you know what I really think that we have to show up, and we have to say, I love you, and we're going to figure this out. But honestly, other than that, I feel like you need to just adapt, because also every single kid, there is not a reflection of you. It's not your mini you. It's a whole different, unique human being that if you remember to respect that uniqueness, you're going to go about parenting a lot is better than saying, God, you got that from your dad. And really, you should probably change that. And, the moment that you start judging that and saying, you should, and you should, honestly, we are all very unique, very, very unique. And I don't understand why many parents think that our kids are a deception to it. So I feel like there's a lot of judgment sometimes when it comes to parenting, and that control that you're like, well, no, I don't want you to turn out I don't want you to maybe the only thing that I really think that you should be super, super consistent and never bent on is showing up for your kid and reminding them that you love them.
Awesome. I would just say regarding that the judging that you're talking about, I think where a lot of it comes from, and this is going to get into our next question regarding self-care in a minute over here, but I think a lot of it comes from a judgment that we have on ourselves. And we feel like, you know what, there's something wrong with me if I'm not parenting this way. I'm doing something wrong if my child is not in bed at exactly when they're supposed to be in bed. So there's something wrong with me. And if we're going to be judging ourselves, of course we're going to be judging our kids. Of course, it's going to happen that way.
But you know what? A lot of people don't realize that when you're judging first of all, a lot of parents don't realize that they're actually judging themselves, and therefore they're judging their kids. They just think that they're failing. They're failing at something. And I was like, what are you failing at? I remember I worked with a mom, and she's like, oh my God. I remember the day that I had to drop off my kid to school on sandals, and everybody wore socks and shoes. And I just I couldn't get over it, and it ruined my day. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? What is the problem? And exactly, just everybody had socks and shoes, and I was the only parent that didn't do that. I was like, well, was your kid happy? Yeah, she was so excited to wear sandals, and I was just like, okay, so why was it what's the?
You're confused.
Uniform? Yeah. And they're like, no, but all the parents saw my kid walk into the classroom with sandals. And I was like, okay. I was just like, so I still don't get it. Tell me more.
Well said.
And it's so funny because once you realize that there's really not more to say, then you start to maybe slowly acknowledge that I was like, oh, I just didn't want to be seen as a one parent. But was your kid happy? Yeah. All right, then was your kid safe? Yeah. Well, did your kid feel heard that she wanted to wear sandals and not the shoes and the socks? Yeah. Well, then I would say that you were
doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, safe, seen, loved, checked.
Exactly. Perfect. I think that's exactly what parenting is all about, and knowing how to go ahead and deal with each child individually for what they need is so important. And we'll get back to that. But going back to what we were just saying before regarding a parent judging themselves, I think a lot of that could come from a stress that we have on ourselves regarding certain expectations. So can you talk for a minute about the concept of parents making sure that they have self-care and they do things for themselves in order for them to be better parents? How, maybe some tricks or some things that you maybe might talk to your clients about that can be of benefit to parents to help them make sure they take care of themselves so that they can help others more.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Because this is exactly where I really feel like it's the change maker of a lot of parents. A lot of parents are pouring out of an empty cup, and you can pour out of an empty cup. You just can't. Like, I know that it feels like you should because you're a mom, and that type, but the title of being a parent, a mom or a dad, doesn't give you unlimited feeling. It just doesn't work that way. You're still very much your own person. And before you had kids, you had these ways of taking care of yourself, and none of them go away because you just added another human into the world. They actually become even more important because then you have to give more. Before you have kids, you are an owner of your own calendar, an owner of your own time. And if you're compromising is with another adult, which is a lot easier to compromise with an adult sometimes.
Sure. Most of the time, right?
Most of the time. There's always exceptions. But we often forget that we are like, okay, but now I'm a mom. Like, now I really have to be here. Now I really have to and yes, you do, but you have to do it after you fill up your own cup. Because otherwise you're not showing up as your best self. You're running ragged. You're just exhausted. You're not even thinking straight, and you're just reacting because you're incapable of taking those 6 seconds that it takes to respond in the best way that you could.
Right. So you're reacting, you're not parenting.
Exactly. And many of us are going to regret those reactions, or we're going to immediately realize that we could have handled it better, or gosh, I just need more coffee. Like that, those instant responses is your body telling you. It's your mind begging you to come back to yourself. So the moment that you just take that time and realize, you know what, and every parent is different. I work on time management because all agendas are different, and some people are morning people, and I'm not gonna come here and tell you, oh my God, you should just own your morning and wake up at 5. Like, it doesn't work for everybody. But what I do think that you need is to stay true to yourself. If you have a hobby, respect your hobby. If you have a way to decompress, it becomes even more important once you become a mom, because there's a lot more triggers into your life. If you journal, but always stay true to what your body already needed prior to having kids. That's the fastest tip that I can give you. And now, obviously, if you can make time for yourself alone as still adults, and if you have a partner with them, it's going to help you stay on the same team. And I know it comes with a guilt trip. I know that you feel bad for taking that dinner out. I know that you're like, oh my God, but I should be with my kid. What you really need to do is show up for your kid and say, Mommy needs a minute. Yeah, it's okay to say that. And the kids 100%. Get it.
If anything, the same way sometimes they need a few minutes just to do their own thing or run around when they come out of the car or when they get off the bus. You know, we need the same thing. We also need to recharge in a certain way. We're called humans for a reason. And, just because we're, this in a position to be more responsible for someone else doesn't mean that we can't be responsible for ourselves. And it's very important honestly, that we do that.
I would argue and say that the moment that you're asking for space for yourself, you're encouraging your kid to do the same thing. So you are empowering them to say that when I need space, Mommy, I need space. And that's okay. You deserve space. Your dad deserves space, Mommy deserves space, the kids deserve space, and sometimes even a puppy, because we don't leave him alone. So honestly, if you're showing up and you become a role model to yourself, your kids are also watching, and they will pick up on that. They will pick up on saying I need space, and I really enjoy doing this. I'm filling up my cup. I use the language. I tell my girls, Mommy's going to go for a hike because I'm going to fill up my cup with the sun, with the air, with the outdoors, and then I'm going to come back and have the best time ever. But first, Mommy needs to fill up her cup.
Awesome. So important. I love that. I love that. It goes so far. Now, is that something that you saw growing up regarding, the way you grew up with your parents, or, coming to a new country and seeing the way things are, and just things being so fast paced and just being so on top of each other and certain expectations and constant movement? Is that something that you were able to pick up from other people, or did you emulate that from someone else, or is that something that you were able to pick up from yourself?
I actually, my mom did take care of herself. She would work out at home, and I remember she would just use cans and say, "Okay, mommy's working out." And sometimes we would like dance around her and try to, but she would just be on the moment. But however, I wish I could say that it was like, yeah, I read about it, so I got it. No, absolutely not. I had my kids, and I tried to be the person that was just pouring and pouring and pouring, and I struggled, and I was not a happy person, and I was intolerant, and I was angry, and I was impatient, and then I was just like, this is not who I am, and this is most definitely not who I want to be, and this is not
and not the way you want to parent
by my kids. Right? This is not how I want to be remembered. Because I remember how I felt by my parents when they did something that I liked, and when they were reacting. I remember. And I don't want to be remembered that way. So that's when I was just like, all right, something has to change. And in one of the parenting classes, a lot of them actually start with saying, unpack your own bag, start with yourself. And I was like, oh. So that's when I was just like, all right, well. And then it became a non-negotiable, because we know and we realize by just giving it a week.
How essential it is,
Right, yeah. Give it 1 week straight of where you're taking care of yourself. And if you don't see the difference on how you show up, if you don't even get one compliment from the people that are stuck living with you, then you can try something different. But it's so fast. The results are so fast that you have no reason to ever go back.
Right. So just, to talk a little bit more about these boundaries when it comes to, well, the structure that we were talking about before, but also taking care of yourself. Obviously doing, let's say, whether it's scholastic responsibilities or home responsibilities and chores, and how that's essential for children, making sure that they're growing up in a certain type of environment. Are any tips or anything that you would suggest, people, pay more attention to when it comes to setting boundaries at home and making sure that they are flexible enough to do what's right, but also keeping it in a way where it doesn't have to be, I guess you could say, dealt with an iron fist, so to speak?
I have a lot of opinions about this, because I feel like open communication and explaining, depending on your kid, right? I have one that loves for me to get into the story and the reason behind it and the why and the conclusion and the whole project management into the thing. Yeah. And it works for her. The moment that she understands that the only way to sleep in a beautiful bed that you're going to enjoy sleeping and really going to rest and feel cozy is by not leaving all your toys inside, then great. That worked for her. The other one is just more like, I don't even want to hear it. Just tell me what I need to do. So I do. So I can adapt and adjust. But honestly, open communication and realizing and staying curious as of, am I doing it out of ego, or am I doing it because it's really the best choice? Am I setting a boundary because I think that they should be in bed by 8? Or am I setting a boundary because I really kind of need the space? And the moment that you decide between those two, then you can communicate that. You actually do need night hours of sleep because you're growing and you're developing and your brain needs to grow. Or this is the bedtime that is set in this house. And you don't have to go to sleep, but you have to have quiet time in your room, because this is how this household is going to be.
Beautiful.
Depending on your child. But definitely stay curious and ask yourself, is this an expectation that somebody told me that I should follow and all kids should go to bed at 8? Or is this a boundary that we actually need, because then I need to decompress and be able to run the dishwasher and load it all by myself?
Correct. And I think it depends when you're going about rules in general and doing responsibilities at home. Am I doing it because, well, I don't like taking out the garbage, so I want to make my kids take out the garbage? Or am I giving them the job of taking out the garbage because it could teach them a sense of doing something and being a part of the family unit and doing things in a certain way? Are they going to bed at 8 o'clock? And am I going to make sure that they go to bed at 8 o'clock because I need them to go to bed at 8 o'clock? Or are they going to bed at 8 o'clock because they need to get a certain amount of sleep in a sense? So I think you're 100% correct.
The moment that you start realizing it, which decisions you're making out of ego and which decisions you're making for the benefit, you won't have a problem explaining that to your kid. You won't have the problem saying, this house, you live here and we all help out. And so therefore we all split chores. this one's yours, this one's mommy's, and then you don't have a problem explaining it. But if it's out of ego, then you're going to be like, I'm the parent and I said so.
Exactly.
Right.
Which I think there is a place for that when it comes to safety and when it comes to, making sure our kids are leading a certain type of lifestyle that we want them to lead, that makes sense for them. And I think saying that there is a place for it. But if that's going to be said too often, you can't pull that out of your sleeve too often, because then it's going to go on deaf ears and it loses its concept as well. About what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, you sometimes have to you have to hold my hand when crossing the street because I said so, it's safe or whatever. But even then, you can explain it really quickly. You have to go to school because I need you to learn. I'm not going to homeschool you. I'm not going to teach you. You're not going to learn how to read. And then what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to know what you're going to be into it? How do you know if you're going to be good or bad or math if you don't try it? Even then, I said so, but I'm saying it because it's important and it's going to help you. So I personally don't have a problem explaining myself because I feel like you get less resistance. Even if it's because they just want you to be quiet, you get less resistance.
Well, for sure. How about for electronics, which, living in a world where our kids have email addresses a lot earlier than our parents did, or than we did probably, having electronics is something that is part of our everyday life for hours upon hours a day. Any specific tricks or suggestions that you have for how the parent should be dealing with the boundaries when it comes to electronics in the home?
Yeah, I definitely think that's definitely a boundary in which you can almost use the card of saying because I said so as. And honestly, the research shows that the unlimited screen time really does add, I don't want to say it affects the brain in a negative way, but it does affect the attention span of a child a lot, in which you can really tell the difference on how they are holding a conversation. So I'm not against screen time. I'm actually a pro measured screen time with an understanding that there's a lot of scary things in the internet. There's a lot of scary things out there, and there's necessarily not a lot of benefit of having the screen time all the time. So I know it's a huge backup plan, like plan B, or I get it. I've been exhausted and tired, and I have been the parent saying here's the phone, just play with it for a minute.
Yeah. Let the phone do the babysitting while I, take care of dinner.
Right. No, honestly, I feel like there's a lot you just have to get creative. A lot of our parents did because they had to, because the phones, they were not an option. So you have to decide how important this is to you. How do you feel about it? What is it that you support and what is it that you believe? And based on that, then you're going to parent accordingly. But you have to do your own research. You can't be sold on anybody else's expectations. You can't be sold on it actually teaches them how to read. You do your own research and then decide accordingly. But I can assure you that many of us, like you just said, survive without it. And we could move forward. So if you want to just creative, there's a lot of Pinterest, Instagram accounts that can show you activities on how to still get the same quiet time without giving the screen.
Awesome. I 100% agree. I think it's something that if we embrace it, it could be used for its benefit. And it's up to us to decide how we're going to go ahead and do that. But to also remember that our kids look at us all the time. And what we're doing, they see, and they want to copy. So if we're going to be on our devices a certain amount of time or in certain places or over the weekend and, checking emails, whatever it may be, our kids are going to notice that. And they take that into consideration regarding who they are as people as well and what they're going to emulate and what they're going to do as they grow older.
So I think I might have misunderstood your question. I was thinking that you were asking me about the screen time on them. But the parents using on the phone and being addicted, I think that, it's becoming a new normal and not necessarily one that we should be super proud of. I feel like the effects are worse. I personally almost think that if you're ignoring or dismissing your child because you're so busy in front of your phone, you're not acknowledging how much damage you're actually creating. I'll go back to the exact same thing that I said when I began this conversation. I feel like any child needs to feel loved, seen, and safe. And when we're seen watching our screen, they're not feeling seen.
For sure.
So I feel, just to clarify my stand on it,
No, yeah, 100%.
I think a technology is great, is very helpful, but it has been really hurtful on the family dynamics. And so you have to be super aware of how you're using it to your advantage and how it might be using you.
Yeah.
So as long as you're aware.
Oh, for sure. I think that awareness is so important. And also want to go back to something else you were saying before regarding, different kids need, you were explaining with your daughters how one needs more of an explanation, one just tell her what to do and hopefully she'll listen every time you say something. I think it could be hard sometimes. And I per se, as a parent, I think I find this the hardest of making sure there's a proper balance of giving each kid what they need when each kid is so different from each other. I'm curious from your point of view and the work that you do, what's your experience with parents and how do you talk to them about making sure that you give each kid what they need without the other one feeling like, hey, I'm getting gypped here because they're getting a little more of that or a little less of this and I have to do more. My chore is a lot harder than theirs, or they get more screen time, or they get to stay up later, whatever it is that we have. I think it's one of the hardest things. So what are some things that you talk about with parents regarding that issue?
I encourage to go back to the uniqueness that we each have. And this is something that I really think that we should speak of a lot more often with ourselves, with our families, with our friends, especially with our kids, because many of us, like I even started my story, get so stuck in trying to fit in and trying to be treated a certain way. But in reality, if you are growing up in a house in which you are respected and honored and embraced for your uniqueness, then you can really show up in the world a lot more confident. So what I normally recommend the parents that I work with is taking the time to explain that to the kids. Let the ego aside and realize that you're not raising a mini you. Let the ego aside and realize that the competition between siblings always is present, but also let them know, I am doing the best that I can in the way that I think you need. Kids couldn't be more different, and the personality, honestly, I think if you listen and watch what works for both of them, and they're both feeling seen for their needs, that competition doesn't come to play as often. That comparison of well, she didn't, no didn't. Then you can also say, oh, but did you play soccer? Because your sister didn't play soccer, but you enjoy soccer. So did you get to play soccer? Because if you're seeing and watching what
pieces here and there, right?
The tiny little ones, but if you're listening and watching what your kid embraces, you can bring that up in that same comparison. I was like, well, you enjoy this and your sister doesn't. So we encourage you and empower you to do it. And so right now we're encouraging and empowering your sister into trying what she enjoys.
Beautiful.
So
awesome.
We're trying to parent you both the way that we both see fit. And I feel like if both feel seen and listened, then they will start to realize I'm getting seen in my uniqueness.
Yeah, but I think that's great. And that's exactly what we want as parents, for each kid to grow up and feel that uniqueness for themselves. And I think it's sometimes, we wonder, is it going to happen properly? Are we doing a good job? And I think over time you get to see certain things. And when you see them get along, it makes it all worth it. And they're listening and they're doing what they're supposed to. And it could get hard at other times when they're not listening or they're not doing the things that we want them to do, but they have no interest in doing. Just to touch up on one more thing regarding on this topic as well. Anything specific that you talk about with parents regarding more effective and efficient homework time at home and making sure that kids are getting the work done that the school needs them to get done, even though sometimes it could be really difficult, both for mommy and daddy and for the children as well.
Gosh, that homework is a lot hard. I feel like the test is real.
Yeah. I feel like I'm, that TV show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I should be taking notes when I'm watching it just to make sure that, when my kid's in fifth grade, I get the right answers.
I honestly feel like, the test is real, but I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I feel like just being open communication of I know this is hard. Gosh, I'm even struggling with this, but together we're going to get through it because this is important and you might never use it in your life. But the fact that you're getting it done, the fact that you're doing something hard is teaching you resilience, and it's going to make you a better human being. Because then this struggle of sitting through the 5th grade math with circles and madness that I don't follow will come back into your life, and you, when you see an Excel or a chart or a Visio in project in whatever job you decide to have, you're gonna face those moments in which you're just like, why am I sitting here, and what is this, and I don't want to. But the willingness of doing it, the responsibility of getting it done, is gonna show you a lot more than the actual horrible homework that a lot of us get stuck with.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just like an open book about it. And if I'm struggling, I don't know if you have gotten this by now, but my face doesn't hide a lot of my emotions. So if
you wear emotions on your sleeve, and I think sometimes as a parent, it's such a good thing for kids to see and express themselves. And when we act a certain way, they get to see what that reaction is on someone else, someone that they want to emulate and be like, especially if we have a good relationship with them. So there's a certain sense of, when you act a certain way, like, you know what, honey, I have no idea what the heck this is talking about. Let's try to figure it out. Let's, call someone. Let's go to Google. Let's try to do something. And you know what? If we don't do it, we don't do it. We tried. We did the best we could. And that's enough sometimes as well.
Oh, yeah. And saying, I'll say, you know what? This is hard. So we're going to give it our best. Yeah. And if we don't do a great job, then we know that we have to, ask for help, call a friend, that game of like, exactly. I'm gonna use the call. Or maybe even tell the teacher, I was like, can you walk me through it? Because I don't even know how to assist my child into this madness of, like, the whole tutoring becomes a whole, like, they should have parent and child sometimes because it's so
for
different.
Sure. Yeah, there should be a crash course on parenting homework, given just so that we know what to do in these situations for stuff that we haven't used since that grade also. So, it could be
it's
hard.
not just the homework, it's also the grades. Like, I grew up in a very strict home in which, like, if you didn't get a B, you were not doing your best. I feel like sometimes my best was a D. In college, I discovered that coding was not my thing. And I kid you not, I tried. And I left my heart on the books. But I still got a D. And I celebrated that D like nobody else because I passed. And because it was so hard.
It was your best.
Because it was my best. And thankfully, I was smart enough to realize, okay, so maybe this is not necessarily for me and I can try something different. But it's celebrating the fact that we're trying, the fact that we don't have to be good at everything. And thank God, because that would be exhausting and overwhelming. Like, why would you want to be good at everything?
It's not possible. So, it's
and
why
can you
put
imagine how
exhausted
you would? You would be exhausted.
100%. That's a very good point. Now, switching gears here a little bit, but keeping it within subject over here, regarding outside influences, and when we have things or people, whether it's through the internet and social media and what they're watching or being around others in school, sometimes things that are heard or picked up by our children are not necessarily things that we agree with, we like, not necessarily regarding politics, but it could be just regarding dress or words that a child might use, or, but even TV shows that we might not want our child to watch. So how would you suggest a parent put themselves in a position to be respectful towards others, but also know how to set those boundaries when it comes to their home and how they lead stuff in their home?
Such a good question, because it's a tough position to be at sometimes, and it leads to a very uncomfortable conversation. But conversations, especially the tough ones, those are where you're really parenting. So the words, I'll start with the words because that one's a good one. They learn them so fast.
Ooh, yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm educated by kids. On new things that they might bring home.
Mom, that word is like 10 years old. I get it. No, honestly, I feel like you have to just have the open conversation of like that is a cool word, but let me tell you how it makes me feel. Like I grew up in a house in which you would never, ever curse around your parents. Ever, ever. And I can tell you why I like that. I feel like I was showing up as not the person that I was expected, but as a version of myself that was willing to show up, you know? I'm not saying if you're gonna curse, you can curse, but there's a time and a place for everything. And you wanna just make sure that when you're using and showing up with the words that you are using, you're aware of what you're making others feel. Because many times we're just trying to fit in, but in reality, what you really, really want to concentrate on is how are you making others and yourself feel? Are you just feeling like cool? Are you just trying to get by? Like you wanna make sure that you are proud of who you are at all times. And I am proud to say that I don't like those words, because when they're used towards me, I don't feel necessarily respected. And I also tend to tone out a little bit of the message. The moment that I receive one of those words, I'm not necessarily longer paying a lot of my attention to that person. So I'm okay saying that. And sometimes I have said that to other parents. I respect the way that you guys communicate. However, I don't encourage it in my house because we feel this way. And so it's just an understanding on different perspectives. I did have a mom that said, I really never thought of it that way. And another one is like, well, you do you. And both are perfectly okay responses. But as long as I am being true to myself and showing up the way that I want to. And if I'm saying that communication is important to me, I am going to say, am I handling this the way that a communicative person would?
I like that.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I know.
I got triggered.
I think it's growing up in a similar type home where, I remember one time, telling my sister to shut up, and I don't know, I just remember getting punished, like, oh my gosh, like it was like the end of the world, and that wasn't even a bad word. So, thinking about it and wanting to instill that in my home as well, I think it's something that, I try hard to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. What I've also found is, especially with my younger ones, is that sometimes they say words more to get attention than they are to say the word. And what I've had to learn to do, and using what you were talking about before regarding that pause we were talking about, is to bite my tongue and say, I'm not going to say anything, because they want to get that attention. But if they see that it's not going to get the attention based on whatever the dialogue is in that whatever's happening, then eventually, it may not be the first, second, or maybe even the 10th time, but eventually they'll get the point, like, that word is not going to route up my father, so I'm not going to say it in front of him anymore, because I want to get it. I want to try to poke him to get him to have a reaction, and I'm not going to do anything. It takes a lot of self-restraint as a parent, because what they're doing is wrong. But at the same time, it's to let it go, and so it sort of like dissipates and make sure that it doesn't come out of you, because that's what they want. And I think it's
for sure. And kids are really like our fastest and the best triggers that we're gonna get. So like as soon as you become like a parent in your home. So if you learn that difference between reacting and responding, you're gonna be a lot more aware of how you're handling a situation. So sometimes you do know that sometimes the best response to not get it again is to not respond at all. So, but it's a difference. It's a difference of awareness, and the difference of the fact that you do know how your kids learn best. Would a conversation work? Like, what were you trying to get to with that word? Help me understand. Are you trying to argue with me? Like, or would you like me to react? Like, if you're one of those people that just have to say something, ask for clarification. I'm sorry. Right. Are you trying to get a reaction out of me? Do you want to sit down and talk about this? Do you want a long ass conversation? Like, then that's when you can decide. I'm reacting, but at least I'm buying myself the 6 seconds that I need to, where I'm just like,
sure,
I don't appreciate that word, and you might see the worst out of me come out if you continue using it around me. Like,
for sure.
Honestly, sometimes being human, because that restraint that you talk about takes years to develop, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of awareness. And a lot of us are in the starting stages to where sometimes asking for clarification buys you enough time to those 6 seconds in which you're just like, do I want to start screaming or do I just ask for clarification? And sometimes, I don't know, it's worth asking, what would the best version of myself do in this case?
Yeah, that's a very good point. But I think it's something that as parents, we're always constantly, learning and growing and changing. And I remember hearing it from my grandfather, who had children in their 50s and 60s, and saying, he's like, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to do certain things. And as a young adult, you're like, what does that mean? And then you have a kids, and a teenager. You're like, oh yes, I know exactly what you mean. So I think that could go a very long way.
Yeah, I feel like this is something that I encourage for everybody that I work with, is to realize that you're a work in progress and you forever are going to be a work in progress. And as soon as it's kind of like Hobbit. It comes out of, things come out of nowhere and they just require adjustment, right? So kids develop and they grow, and out of nowhere, they're going to require adjustment. And if you realize that you're a work in progress, you're going to be a lot quicker to adapt.
100%. And that ties back in beautifully to what we were saying before, regarding the, if we would be reacting to the situation, and what was the other one, is reacting or responding? Responding. I love the way you put that. And I think that has a lot to do with us regarding our ego. And where is our ego in what it is that we're doing? Because you said that to me, you can't do that. Is it, no, you said a word you shouldn't be saying. So that's something, let's talk about that. Because if you take things personal, you're in for a long ride regarding how you're going to go about things.
I know. I mean, have you guys not heard about honestly, the 4 agreements? I think it's a book, it's super easy to read, or just Google it. And it's 4 things that are going to change your life, but this is especially in parenting. Is to speak clearly, use your words, be impeccable with the words is actually the number 1. Then always do your best. I think that's the 4th one. But the other 2 are, don't take anything personal and don't make any assumptions. I know they sound so easy, right? And it's almost annoying how easy they sound. But if you really work on those 4 agreements, not only your parenting will change, but a lot of your relationships will. At work, at friends, anybody. You're just, like I said, that's why I often go back to ask for clarification, because a lot of our reactions come from assumptions. We already told ourselves a story, a whole novella. I'm already offended, right? But if I ask, because I'm assuming, because I'm basing it out of a movie that I watched, and so I'm ready to fight you. However, if I ask you for clarification, sometimes you're just like, oh, that's what you meant. All right, yeah, it's fine.
Beautiful. Well said over here. Okay, so wrapping it up over here, and we went in some ways all over the place, but we obviously stayed on top regarding our kids, and talking about how we've grown into who we are, and we're also better people as parents through our experiences as parents, but also through who we are as we're growing up and our own experiences. I think the 2 biggest things that I picked up from our conversation today, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, is the differences between, having a situation that we're dealing with for us or for the situation as parents, and making sure that second part of this is that our ego aspect of it, and making sure that we're parenting to be a parent and not parenting for us in a certain way. And I think the other thing that I think was just the important repetitive part of our conversation today is loving our kids. And loving our kids sometimes not only could, but will come with situations that we don't agree with them. But that doesn't change the fact of our love. So for me, those were the 2 biggest things that I was able to take out of our conversation today. But leaving it to you right now as we wrap things up over here, what's putting it in a sentence or 2? What are some of the things that you were able to learn from our conversation today?
Honestly, I'm honored to have shared space. It was a great conversation. But yes, I do think that it goes back to making sure that you can show up as the best version of yourself to your kids. And that often means leaving your ego aside. If you said one sentence, so I will leave it at that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining with us today, Telma. Is there any place that where people can find you?
I do have a website. It's telmasanchez.com. That's for everything life coaching. But if you want to see who I am as a parent and what I do for my own cup to be full, my Instagram is where you can see the whole me, and it's the Telma SMV. SMV.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the email and the website again is telmasanchez.com.
Yeah, TELMA Sanchez SANCHEZ.
Hey again. I hope you were able to learn as much as I did today. Thank you so much for staying to the end and listening to the entire interview. Please feel free to leave a comment wherever you listen to this podcast. All comments will be read weekly, and we appreciate all feedback and ideas. If you have an idea for a guest or a specific topic, please feel free to share. Additionally, you can contact us at parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for joining today, and remember, parenting is a journey. Don't forget to enjoy it. The goal is to be a little better today than yesterday, and hopefully better tomorrow than we were today.